Right. So in this last notebook, what we'll be learning is the organizational and searching capabilities in DataFed. Largely focusing on two concepts, collections and queries. Okay. So again, like last time, we start off with just doing the basic import statements, then instantiating the API class of DataFed, and then setting a context to the training project. That way we are sure that we're working the training project and not somewhere else. And then, like before, go ahead and enter your ID or alias for your collection. I'm going to enter mine. All right. So the last notebook, the example was focused on simulations, and this one is focused on a toy machine learning problem, where for illustrative purposes, we're trying to put together a machine learning model that is capable of classifying cats from dogs or separating cats from dogs. In order to put together our training data, and obviously we will have a lot of training data to train our machine learning model, you don't want to have this strewn about all over the place. So what you want to do ideally is to put this into some sort of an organizational structure, right? And this organizational structure, as I've been saying before, is in DataFed speak a collection, right? The way we create a collection in DataFed is using this collection create command right here. And sort of like the data create command, it requires the title as an input. And then preferably you want to specify where you want this collection to be created. Ideally, we want this to be created within each of our own user spaces. So if we hit Shift Enter, we get a response which is somewhat similar to the ones we've seen before. Again, a Google Protocol buff response, and this happens to be a collection data reply response. So importantly, just like the tasks before or the data create before, what we see is these basic pieces of information. And some piece of information we're especially interested in, which is the ID, right? So just like how we did for the data record, nothing particularly interesting or special. All we do is some slicing and subscripting, and we can get the training collection ID out of this particular object, right? Out of this response object. Now we go ahead and we try to populate the collection with some training data. I left this as an example. So the idea here is to create a function which generates some fake training data. So this is a function which creates a animal, right? So you can specify whether you want this to be a dog or a cat. And depending on this Boolean value, we can go ahead and create a record here, extract the ID of the record, and then put data into the record, all right? The first thing you want to do is create a record, and for that you want to use a data create command, and that's what I do right here. As it turns out, I already have the title here, so I'm going to just reuse the title, and then I'm going to provide metadata saying that the only field that we really care about is this one field, animal key, and it's going to say whether this is a cat or a dog, and that's coming from this very simple if condition right here. The next thing we do is this usual task of extracting the record ID out of the response, which is, as you've seen before, something that looks like this, some subscripting, some indexing, and you get to it. Just like last time for the simulation example, I've already hard-coded a raw data path in this particular notebook. It's from this SDS as a repository. All we have to do is put the data into this particular data record using the data put command, which would be like so. We only care about this record ID, which we already have, not for the task ID. So it looks like this example is otherwise complete. And all we do next is we go ahead and create 5 dogs and 5 cats. And what I've done here is we've captured the whatever we get as a response from this function. And the response from the function was a record ID. So what we should see when we print cat records is 5 IDs for records, and the same thing for dogs. Okay, so now we have 10 record IDs for cats and dogs. Let's say we wanted to look at this particular collection to see what's actually contained in it. We would use another function in DataFed called collections items list. It's like doing an ls in your file system or a dir. So this is the way you call it. And obviously you need to address the object you want to look at In this particular case, we're looking at the collection containing the training data that we're interested in. Okay. Now, if I hit Shift Enter, you end up getting this fairly long listing. And as you can tell, some of these are cats and some of these are dogs. We use random numbering for the cats and dogs, so they look like somewhat unique objects, even though they're not really unique per se. One thing I do want to point out is we have 5 cats and 5 dogs. The total brings it only up to 10. And that's not particularly large a number, because by default, we're able to see all of them in one shot, because the default maximum number of items that can be listed using this function is 20. But if you had more than this, you'd need to keep modifying the offset and the count values. So they're all keywords here. So I can just say offset equals 5. And if I Shift Enter again, I should only be seeing dogs. I see dog 1, dog 2, dog 3, 4, and 5. So you can play with this offset and count fields in order to move the page forward, if you will. The next thing I wanted to point out to is the data query and the search capability. For this, we do need to use the web interface. So the next step then is to go ahead and create a search for just cat. The way we do that is by going and clicking on this data search tab on the bottom left. All the data you're interested in should be in this project share. And let me just click on one of the cats, for example, and click on the metadata. What you'll notice is we only have one field called animal cat. Okay. What I can do is drag and drop the animal into the metadata field, or you can type empty.animal if you want, and say equals cat. I'm going to turn off the projects under the scope, and I turned on the select checkbox. We want to search, but we'll only search in this particular collection. And now, if I hit go, it should give me all the results. You should be getting 5 results, and they should all be cats. All right. And then what you should be able to do is save this search. So I can just say is cat. I can save it right there. And where did that go? Let me zoom outwards. If you zoom back, if you go back to the My Data tab and you collapse everything, the fourth one is saved queries, and you'll be able to see is cat.
Suhas, you just open the folder in the tree.
So that's how you can get this done in the web interface. Now returning to, I was asked to caution you about the vocabulary for the search, and that is going to change.
So I'd just like to interject that I am currently working on schema support for data searching, and it is going to change the web interface quite a bit and hopefully make it much easier to compose complex metadata queries.
The next function I wanted to go over was the query list. As the name suggests, all it does is it lists all the queries that you have saved. In my case, at least, I've only saved one query, minimizing everything. So I've only saved one query, which is cat, and that's the only thing that I'm seeing right here. It's again a listing reply, sort of similar to your collections listing. We can always go through the Pythonic way of reading the query ID, which would have been this. So that's how we get at the query ID. Then, like I mentioned before, just like viewing a task or a data record, etc., it is possible to view the details of the query. As you can tell, this complex string is what results in the query actually working. And we can run the query without using the web interface again, using the query exec function. And this is the response that we get. And as you might imagine, just like the web interface, by running the query, we do notice that we only get cats. We do not get dogs. So we do only have 5 in this list as opposed to 10. So we know we're doing this correctly. The next thing I wanted to show was gathering just the IDs of the cats out from this particular listing. All you have to do is grab the ID field of each of these responses. So that's all I did right here. And the next cell just proves that the result that we get from the search is the same as what we started off with. One of the last few things I wanted to do is the organization part of the collections. The next thing we want to do is create a collection to hold only the cats. And all I'm doing here is using the collection create function. And I specify a title, which is cats. And then I say that, can you please put this into training collection ID? This is similar to what we did before. And if I did that, I would end up getting this particular collection right here. So I guess I went one step further. To get at the collection ID is just to run this particular indexing and subscripting line. The collections items update is the function that you need to add or remove objects from a particular collection. If you revisit this particular training project, and if I go all the way down to project share, I have indeed created a cats collection. It is empty right now, okay? Because the dogs and cats are still strewn about in the main collection. And the way we go about putting them into one place, take the cats from that collection and point them into the cats collection is by using the items update function. And all I'm saying is to this cat collection, please add these IDs. And we've already prepared the IDs, which was right here. We already have the IDs prepared. So all I'm going to do is do a collection update. We don't get much in response, which is probably one of those odd functions. The collections item list of the cat collection only has the cat data. It doesn't have the dog data. One way to verify that is by opening up the cats collection. And as you can tell, we do only have the cats right here and not the dogs. But as you can tell, the cats 209, the 341, etc. are all still present in both collections. This is what I mentioned at the beginning of the tutorial, that we can have objects linked in multiple collections. And if you wanted to ensure that the cats only sit in one particular collection, then we have to call the collection items update. In this case, instead of add IDs, we'll have to call remove IDs. This is what we will be doing here. All I did was remove from the training ID, which is the external one, only the cats. So if I go back to the DataFed web interface, and if I hit refresh, as you can tell, this is the parent collection. It only has the dogs now. It doesn't have the cats. And the cats have been added only to the cats collection and not the dogs collection. So basically, this was an illustration of how you would do organization of records and collections in DataFed. So you can add items, you can remove items within collections using this collections items update function.
Quick question. When you do update the collections items, you kind of get an empty response.
Yep.
So that's okay.
Right.
Yeah, that's an area that is going to be addressed. So currently, a lot of the functions that do updates or creations and things return like a lot of information. Basically, a lot of these functions are going to be changed to a binary acknowledge or it failed with some error information.
As I've mentioned to you all before, one of the cool aspects about DataFed is you can grab all the data in one go for an entire collection. Again, in this particular case, all the cats are located indeed in one data repository, so it's not all that interesting. But assuming that each member had put up their own cat or dog or something like in different repositories spread across the globe, this command right here, data get, same thing that we used for getting an individual data record, would still work for the entire collection. We can go ahead and grab all the data in one go. And it's going to take some time. I'm going to run this last cell. And what you see that indeed we do have the 5 cats. That's what we expected, in fact. In the cat data directory, we managed to get all 5 cats in one go without having to specify each cat individually or having to verify whether the actual data was in NERSC or Argonne or Livermore or Oak Ridge, etc. So one function which ends up grabbing all the data from all repositories and dumping it into your destination directory, if you will.